Associate Vice President of Globosport India. Mr. Indranil completed his BA in English from St. Stephen's College in 2002, worked for a year in Tiger Sports Management, and then joined Globosport in 2004. During this time, he has handled various accounts of many famous and popular sportsmen. He not only enjoys watching sports, but also enjoys playing tennis and football. Thank you, Mr. Indranil, for joining us here at GIM.
I'm not an eminent personality, not a big personality like I've actually been that before. But here to talk about the sports marketing industry in India. I know a lot of people are very interested in the sports marketing industry. I started working in 2002, and I've always known that I wanted to be in sports. I had no idea how to get into it. I think I was lucky, a lot of shots in the dark. Luckily, one of them worked out, and I've been in sports ever since. So the way we've structured this presentation is it'll be broken into three halves. I'm going to try and keep the presentation as short as possible so that I can answer your questions. Starting with an overview on global sports marketing, getting down to the Indian context, and finally what Globosport does as a company. Just a very brief introduction into Globosport. It's a company started by the tennis player Manish Bhopati. This was in 2002, and I look after the sports division. Globosport does a lot more besides sports. Won't get into that aspect. We'll talk about the sports division. Okay, not too many people know this, but globally sports is huge. It drives 8% of all ad spend, all advertising spend is spent on sports. And out of this, 80% is spent on sports sponsorships. Okay, when I say sports sponsorships, I mean sponsorships. It means team, team endorsements, player endorsements, event endorsements. We'll get into details in a minute. Okay, football is the biggest sport. If you just see the slide there, you have global sports like football, tennis, athletics, and swimming. At the same time, you have regional sports. Cricket is a regional sport. It's played in 10 countries across the world, but in those 10 countries it is big. Similarly, in America you have basketball, baseball, which are very big in America, but they are still classified as regional sports because they are not global. So if you look at global sports, it would really be football, which is the big gorilla. Okay, in terms of revenue in sports, this is how we make our money. Okay, these are the percentages. You have broadcast rights, which is the big daddy of them all. The reason why BCCI is the biggest sports body in the world is because all its money comes from Nimbus, which is the sports production. Besides that, you have sponsorships, which is what a company pays to own an event or a player. You have licensing and you have ticketing. Okay, all sports properties follow this model, be it the Olympics, be it the ICC World Cup, be it quadrangular cricket series. All properties follow this particular model. Okay, so we'll just look at sports sponsorships. Typically, these are the three conventional areas of sponsorships. You have events and stadium sponsorships. You have something like the Arsenal Stadium, Highbury is sponsored by Emirates. Okay, you have teams. Here again we have Arsenal, which is again sponsored by Emirates Airlines. And you have individual player endorsements. Here you have two of the biggest names in celebrity endorsements. You've got Tiger Woods and David Beckham. Okay, these are your three conventional areas of sponsorships that a company will typically invest in. Later during the presentation, we'll tell you where all other companies are investing in. Okay, sports with brands. Two case studies that we have. One is Coke. Universally, they don't do it so much in India. In India, they've decided to go the Bollywood way, which is why they have people like Aishwarya. But globally, you ask most people what do you associate Coke with, they'll say the Olympics, they'll say the FIFA World Cups, because traditionally Coke has always spent a lot of money on being associated with events like this. Okay, so it would be fair to say that Coke started off building its brand with sports. In India, you have Coke's rival Pepsi spending a lot on sports, and we'll again come to India specifically a bit later on in the presentation. But for Pepsi, Pepsi is equated with cricket. So you talk about any cricketing event that's happened in the country over the past 10 years, Pepsi has been involved in some way or the other. Be it a global partner with the ICC, be it a partner with the BCCI, they've always been a part of cricket. They've been a partner with the ICC, player endorsements, pretty much you name any player in the Indian team, and if I was to ask you, is Virender Sehwag with Pepsi? I think a lot of you will say yes. Fact is, Virender has always been at Coke, but because Pepsi does his marketing so effectively, if you talk about any individual player, you just think that they are from Pepsi, right? 20% of Pepsi's marketing budget is spent on cricket. Okay, now we can't Pepsi won't divulge its figures in terms of the marketing budget, but 20% of that is spent on cricket. Okay, they leverage cricket better than any other Indian company, be it Sahara, be it Hero Honda, be it LG, be it Hutch. Do you guys remember any of the Pepsi ads? Yeah, campaigns like Blue Billion, there was Toss the Boss. Even people who don't follow cricket remember that. Right? That's how successful Pepsi has been. Self-explanatory slide about sports being all pervasive. In India, there are two religions, there's Bollywood and there's sports. Bollywood is huge in terms of endorsements, in terms of the connect, but Bollywood is not that big in East India, it's not big at all in South India. But if you look at sports, and particularly cricket, there's an emotional connect that you get to cricket that you don't get anywhere else, right? Which is why sports is so important to a market. Okay, now we'll get into the Indian market, which I guess would be the area of interest. Evolved sports marketing across the world, okay, always has a few sports in the country which dominate. Okay, so for example, in the US, you'll have your gridiron football, you'll have basketball, you have the NHL. Okay, in England, you have rugby, you have cricket, you have football. In a place like Japan, you have football and you have. So there's not a formal presentation, so if you guys want to ask questions at any time, just feel free to ask. Okay. So in every evolved sports marketing country, you have a big, 3-4 big sports, and you have a few smaller sports. The way we classify it in the sports industry is as a gorilla sport and as a chimp sport. Right? That really hasn't happened in India because India is still an evolving market. It still hasn't reached, with Japan's stage or even the States. But in India, can anyone tell me what the gorilla sport is? Cricket, right? As obvious as it gets. Okay. A few figures on the Indian sports marketing industry. The entire industry is approximately 950 to 1,000 crores, right? Out of this, Nimbus, which is the BCCI's broadcasting wing, has given the BCCI 700 crores. This is an annual figure, right? Team sponsorship of the Indian team, which is the Sahara group, they sponsored for 75 crores. Okay, you have Nike, which is giving the BCCI 40 crores. And you have individual cricket endorsements, people like Sachin, Yuvi, Dhoni, Rahul, who all have the individual contracts. So you peg that around 70 crores. You've got a total figure of 900 crores in cricket sponsorships alone. And if you just look at the slide previously, the total sports marketing industry in India is 950 crores. So effectively, in India, sports marketing means cricket marketing. Okay. This is the way we see how sports are broken in India. So at the base level, as a mass sport, you have cricket. You have sports like football and tennis, who are getting to a mass stage, but at the same time, something like tennis is still considered very niche. And at the top end of the spectrum, you have sports like golf and polo, which are totally niche sports. They've got no mass participation whatsoever. Okay. Question. Do you guys know who sponsored the India-Australia cricket matches that happened just before India left for Australia? Anyone at all? TBS. Anyone? Any other guesses?
Video.
Videocon. Future Group. Okay, and the India-Pakistan series? FC, no? Okay, both. Okay, before I get to the answer, I'll ask the next set of questions. Who sponsors the marathon? And who sponsors the tennis? The tennis and Stanchart does the marathon. Okay, the company that sponsors the 2 cricket series was the Future Group. I think someone told me about it. Okay. The point we're trying to make is a company like the Future Group has spent close to, per match, it spends close to 20 crores. Right? And how many of us remember Future Group did it? No one. There's TBS, there's Videocon. You know, cricket is a very cluttered space. At the same time, the Stanchart Marathon, your Stancy pays the organizers approximately 2.5 to 3 crores. Okay, but everyone knows Stancy. Sunfeast pays 3 crores for title sponsorship. Again, everyone knows Sunfeast. Right? So, in spite of this, how did cricket become, the big sport that it is today? We attribute it to 4 different factors. We think that if any sport follows these 4 factors, they will be as big as cricket in the next 5-6 years. Okay. One is world-class action, close to home. This really started with the Reliance Cup in '87. This was after our World Cup win. After that, we had a couple of big tournaments. We had the World Cup in '92. But the boom started in cricket after we won the World Cup and after we started getting quality action in India. The other factor is the emergence of one singular icon in Indian sports. Can anyone? Sachin. Sachin is a phenomenon because while you had a Kapil and a Gavaskar, I think everyone who followed cricket knew who he was. But if you spoke to most average housewives, they'd know, okay, there's someone called Kapil Dev, or there's someone called, Sunil Gavaskar. But the moment Sachin came to the field in '89, you had little girls, you had housewives, you had people who didn't follow cricket. Who suddenly knew who Sachin Tendulkar was. He went beyond the sports pages, right? So the emergence of the icon Sachin Tendulkar made the boom happen. The third one is the media overdrive. Nowadays, who Yuvraj is dating, who Sachin gets a new Ferrari. It's all there in the it's not there in the sports pages because it goes beyond the sports pages. So the media has actually fueled the sport. The last one is consumption in multiple formats. Cricket, although it's a very state game, typically it was a 5-day format. The administrators have got 2020, you've got 1 day. Because of multiple formats, you've got something for every person really. If you don't have 5 days to spend, most working professionals, or even students like you guys, you can't spend 5 days watching match. What do? You watch a 1-day match. Yeah, if you're studying and you don't have time, you watch a 2020. So there's options for every level of interest that you show, which is why cricket's done so well. Okay, but at the same time, is cricket reaching its potential? Are brands that are investing in cricket getting the bang for the buck? I think that question just proves it. A Future Group has spent close to 300 crores. No one remembers it. And you guys, you guys are some of the brightest brains in the country. You're studying an MBA institute. You know your brands, you know your markets, and you don't know that the Future Group is spending so much on cricket. What chance of the arm janta hai. Okay, traditionally, let's just take what cricket sponsorship in India means and what companies are doing. Sponsorships, event and team, this is happening, BCCI does this. Broadcast rights is doing it and doing it really well. Endorsements at an individual level, it's happening. Digital rights and new media rights. Okay, new media is the biggest phenomenon that's happening in global sports. So typically, today you log on to a Crick Info. You can read what you want. You can get downloads. You can get free, voice commentary. Right? None of this is monetized though. The BCCI doesn't get a penny. Tomorrow, if you want to download a Sachin wallpaper on your phone, you're going to pay much, for that download. But the BCCI is not getting any money. Sachin Tendulkar is not getting any money. So digital rights are huge. As a company in Globosport, we are betting that 90% of our money over the next 10 years is going to come out of digital media and not out of the conventional sponsorships and marketing that we do. This is something that the BCCI hasn't even tapped. Okay, there's retail consumption, here again merchandising, which the BCCI hasn't done so far. Hopefully the IPL, which is the Indian Premier League, which is launching next April, is going to change that. Okay, and this infrastructure, where are the stadiums, where are the academies? We've got 2 cricket academies in India. One is in Bangalore, and the other one is the MRF Pace Academy in Chennai. Without an ecosystem, we believe in Globosport that you need to develop an ecosystem around the sport to totally recognize its potential. Cricket has done a few things right, and they've done a few things really well. But in terms of an ecosystem, in growing as much as, let's say, a soccer does globally, or even a basketball is doing, it doesn't stand a chance unless it does reject its ecosystem. Okay, so typically the way we see a sport should grow in a country is first do what cricket has done, grow the sport using the 4 matrices that we had identified, and secondly, you leverage all opportunities to develop an ecosystem. Okay, this is just a graphical representation of what I was speaking about. Globosport as a company, since it was started by Mahesh Bhopati, we are very strong in tennis. Tennis has always been our base. We see tennis as having a lot of potential. So we've used the same parameters to try and grow the sport of tennis. Later on during the Q&A, I'll tell you what are the interesting and innovative stuff we're doing in tennis and how we see it going in the next 10 years. But if you look at this, we've got 4 world-class events happening in India. So you've got players like Nadal, who was here last week in Chennai. We've got people like Martina Hingis who have come for our WTA tournament. So you've got world-class action happening in India. You've got the emergence of a national icon. We'll talk about Sania a little later on in the presentation. I know a lot of people will, don't think positively about Sania at all. But any publicity is good publicity. But we'll come back to that later. But she is a national icon at the end of the day. Media coverage again is going beyond the sports pages. Everyone knows who Sania is dating or who she's interested in, what she's wearing. Their fatwa is declared almost every second day. So tennis is growing out on the sports page, although it is Sania driven right now. And thirdly, we've got an ecosystem in place. Today, you've got over 1,000 academies in India. A lot of people don't know this, but the major hubs of tennis in India are not your metros. You go to a place like Nagpur, we've got academies in Chennai, in Chandigarh, and the craze for tennis in these places it's a craze. Yeah? So you've got the ecosystem, and now we are developing a system to nurture enough talent. India always, as a country, has always had the talent, sporting talent, but there was no place to nurture it. Yeah? There was no place, we are not a communist country. So China, what it does is once it identifies talent, the kids are banished into an academy and they're pretty much there for 10 years doing, getting their training and spending all the time. You can't do that. But at least you need to have the option of proper academies, which is what we're giving tennis. Coming back to the question I asked about the future group, a lot of companies, I think a lot of you will have marketing jobs, with, your own games, your HLLs, your PNTs. A lot of marketers still ask us the question, that, okay, why should I sponsor a tennis tournament? Or why should I do something innovative in football? Where are the eyeballs? Where are the TRPs? Okay, I think we just established the fact that if you're looking at marketing today, it goes well beyond eyeballs and TRPs. It's not a question of how many people are watching the match. During the Cricket World Cup, you had, or even during the Australian series right now, you have a TRP of close to 10, 11 on ESPN Star Sports. Yeah, but how many people actually, get any sort of brand recall? We all see a Pepsi advertising, we see a Hutch advertising, but none of us remember who's actually spent, that kind of money on the sponsorship. So when we go to brands, very often our answer to them is either you choose a unique property, you don't get enough bang for the buck in the first 2 years, but invest in the property and build it up over 5 years, and do what a Fancy has done, do what a Sunfeast has done, do what a Kingfisher Airlines is doing with the Kingfisher Airlines Open in Bombay. Yeah. But cricket you can't ignore. Okay, so if you want to spend in cricket, you need to have deep pockets, because if you're spending X amount on sponsorship rights, which is what the BCCI is asking you for, and that X amount is a huge money, you need to spend twice that amount on advertising, on media, right? Unless you spend that amount on media, you're never going to be recognized, right? Which is what I think a lot of companies make this mistake. They want to be in cricket, they allocate a budget of, let's say, 20 crores in cricket, and the BCCI actually takes this 20 crores as sponsorship money, and then they are left, with absolutely nothing to advertise. And unless you are advertising close to 100 crores in cricket, you're not going to beat the clutter, which is why Pepsi does so well, which is why Hutch and Reliance still have record because they have budgets of close to 100 crores on advertising alone. Okay, so the idea is to go beyond the sports pages. The idea is to develop unique properties that create mind recall. This is what as a company Globosport tries to do. I'll explain to you how we do this. Okay. I think the best examples would be the Sunfish Open and the Kingfisher Open. The idea behind these events is not to put them as just hardcore tennis sports events, because if you look at the demography of both Calcutta, where the Sunfish is held, and Kingfisher and the Kingfisher Airlines Open, where Bombay is held, I would say percentage-wise you will have 0.01% of the population of those cities following tennis. Right? If we were to cater to an audience like that, you wouldn't have any of your brands interested. But what we try and do is go beyond the sports pages. How do we do that? We conduct a lot of activities around the event. So typically here, you have people like Marcos Burgades, who's a top 10 player, Rowan Bogner, Richard Gasquet, who are conducting a tennis clinic for the children. Here you see Hingis and Mahesh. We did this thing called a Walk of Fame in Calcutta, in one of the popular malls, I don't remember the name. Where like you have the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where you have celebrities, giving their handprints. We did something like that in Calcutta. Here you see Tommy Robredo actually playing a miniature motor car rally on court with a kid from the audience. This again created a huge buzz. We have music between matches. The idea really is to attract people who have an interest in sport but don't have enough reason to come to the stadium. How do you build that reason? This is something that the 2020 gives people. Why are people flocking to 2020? Because you have entertainment. Right? Sports is not restricted to sports-based. Sports has become entertainment. Sports is fighting against movies, is fighting against music, and it's the only platform where you can actually have music and entertainment along with sports, which is what we try and do in our events. Here you've got some of the players actually walking around doing a fashion show. A few other pictures. You had fashion shows at Sunfish. You had a buggy ride through Cal where we actually had these buggies, and it became a tourist attraction where you had people taking snaps along the Victoria Gardens. So that's how we really build value in our properties, and tell our sponsors that when you sponsor a tournament, you're not just attracting a tennis audience or a football audience, you're also attracting a lot of people who have a latent interest in sports but don't have enough reason to go there. And ultimately it's a cost, it's a factor of money. While your TRPs for both these events were between 1.5 and 2, while that doesn't compare with even a 10 in cricket, if you look at the monies that you're spending. The monies that you spent here were anywhere between 1/5 and 1/10 of what you would spend as an associate sponsor in a cricket match. We don't remember the title sponsor in a cricket match. Chances of us remembering an associate sponsor are non-existent. Okay, a few more pictures. Okay, so typically, why does a company sponsor a sports event? They're listed very clearly. High visibility result for the brands in terms of pure eyeballs. A Pepsi and a Coke, that they have the huge budgets. The product doesn't cost much, so it's in line with their spends. It shapes the attitudes, consumers, and perceptions. The Sahara Group is a company that did this really well when they took on the Indian team sponsorship in 2002, I think it was 2002, 2003. No one knew what the Sahara Group does apart from being part of the Subrata Roy stable. But the moment he took on sponsorship of the Indian team, everyone knew what the Sahara Group does. It certainly got a lot of credibility. Right. Then there's in terms of communication, lifestyle, and passion. How many of you remember the Wills lifestyle ads that came out in 1999 that centered around cricket? Slightly early for your time, but their stance was really all about passion in the sport. Okay. Then you have incentivizing trades, so you have scratch and win cards, you have consumer activation. So these are the various reasons why a company will sponsor a sporting event. While that was a bit about cricket and event sponsorships in India, the other thing that Globosport does is we manage athletes across India. A few of the people that we manage, Zahir Khan, Dinesh, 5 cricketers in the Indian team, Yuvraj Singh included. We manage Sania, and we manage a lot of young talent, people who we see with a lot of potential, and who will hopefully make a name for themselves and won the British Open in last week. Yeah. Then there's this squash player called Saina Nehwal, who's the #1 junior in the world. So we've got people like that, and our idea is really to not really get them endorsements right now, but get them the right sort of training through our academies, through our trust, and hopefully reap the rewards in the next 5-6 years. Okay, a few figures of the the sports endorsement market in India. The entire endorsement figure in India, this includes Bollywood, is approximately 330 crores, out of which sports endorsements is 75 crores. These are annual figures. Okay, the biggest names really are Sachin, the 3 cricketers, and Sania. Just to give you guys an idea, Sachin garners around, I would say, 20 crores a year through endorsements. Yuvraj gets around 12 crores, Dhoni right now is getting around 15 crores, Dravid gets around 10 crores, Sania is getting approximately 11 to 12 crores. Okay, the highest earner by far is Sachin Tendulkar. That's not going to change for the next 2 years because all his contracts are long-term contracts. Okay. So cricket is 85% of all sports endorsements again. Okay. Why do endorsements work for a company? I think the reasons are very obvious. They get your eyeballs if you're a new company looking at it in this space. I'm sure you would probably disagree with me, and I hope you do, because advertising agencies have this tendency, especially a lot of advertising agencies who don't really think about their strategy. The easiest thing for them to tell a brand, or the easiest thing for a brand to decide on, would be, let's get a brand ambassador, let's tag him with our product, and immediately we'll get eyeballs. And it does work to an extent. That's why Shah Rukh Khan makes so much of his money. That's why Amitabh is doing 18-20 endorsements, because ultimately a celebrity endorsement works. But in sports it's slightly different. While the Sachin will always work, while the cricketers will always work, it's different because unlike Bollywood, where if Shah Rukh has a string of 3 flops, it's not going to affect his market rate, it's not going to affect how you all think about Shah Rukh Khan. But, classic case is Yuvraj, someone who we manage. 1 month ago, his market rate for an endorsement was 2.5 crores. Okay, now he's failed in 2 test matches, he's failed in the game today, and his market rate's gone down to 1.5 crores. So the fluctuations are crazy, and realistically, if you ask me, I think most advertisers, most brands would be crazy to spend that kind of money on cricket and on commercial sponsorships. Right? But so it is a risky business. How do we break out of the business? Again, very simple. We try and ensure that the celebrity, the athlete, goes beyond the sports space. So suddenly, his on-field performance shouldn't dictate his market price. How do we do that? Okay. Classic example, Sania, open to debate. Okay, when we started managing Sania, she was pretty much, we started with Sania in fact in 2004, she was the first athlete. And what we very quickly realized is with Sania, as with any other sports, you can't have their market value and you can't have their persona, their image linked to the performance. Because if Sania has one barrier or if Yuvraj has one barrier, he's finished, he won't make any money. So the idea was to go beyond the sports pages. Okay, how do we do that? We did a lot of PR around Sania. We built her as a national icon. Okay, and I would say it sort of succeeded because last year when the Times of India conducted a poll, along with, I think this was the India Today poll, they were asked to rate the national icons in the country. Shah Rukh ranked 1, Tendulkar 2, and Sania 3 over someone like an Amitabh Bachchan. Similarly, there was another poll, this was by the TOI, on female icons in the country. The #1 name was Sonia Gandhi. The #2 was not Rani Mukherjee, it wasn't Aishwarya Rai, it was Sania Mirza. Right? So thanks to the PR that has been a part of Sania, thanks to also her image, she's got a lot of attitude, she's got a lot of spunk. She's gone where no woman has gone before, which has helped us to drive, the PR, helped us to drive the media around it. So frankly today, she's had a horrendous 2007. She was injured. She started off really well, but I think the public memory is really shocked. A lot of people knew that she was injured, but common perception. I'm sure if I ask you guys, 75% of the room would say Sania is all about style and no substance. She's not a good tennis player. Okay, but besides that, keeping that aside, she's still the third highest endorsement earner in the country. She is the #1 female athlete in terms of endorsement in the country, and no one comes remotely close to her. So, so we are open to criticism, and we don't like, controversies. We are not part of all the controversy that she's been dragged in, be it, the fatwas issued against her, short skirts and all that. We believe that a sportsman has the right to behave the way she wants, he wants, as long as he or she is responsible. But, Sania has pretty much been a trump card, and we are not going to change that in the near future. So this is typically what we do at all our celebrities. Just moving out of sports for a change. We also manage someone like Rahul Bose. All of you know who Rahul Bose is, right? Rahul Bose again is never going to be, he's never going to be a mass figure. He's never going to do mainstream cinema. So while we're thinking about how to protect his image amongst brands, we thought of protecting him as the thinking woman's sex symbol. If you're smart, if you've got brains, you like someone like Rahul Bose. And this has worked because right now he's got 5 endorsements. If 2 years ago you would have asked someone like Rahul Bose how many endorsements would you have? He'd say none, look at my face. Yeah, but it's all about the image that you build. This is privy information, but I think I can share it with you guys. With Yuvraj, we just signed him on last month. Okay, we think with Yuvraj again, his image is arrogant, cocky, great talent, but doesn't know how to channelize it. So typically our imaging for him over the next 1 year is to make him seem as someone who's got more substance. He won't be seen partying, even if he is behind shut doors and with no media people allowed. That's step 1, obviously. Then the next one is to get him associated to certain social causes. Get him to be a part of certain campaigns, like the Lead in India campaign that that UI ran. Typically, if you get someone like Yuvraj to be a part of that, it lends a lot more credibility. So with Yuvraj, when we know the talent is there, and he and Dhoni are pretty much the faces of India for the next 10 years, he needs a credibility, which is what we'll be trying and giving him over the next year or two. Some of our bets, and we're almost through, last 5 minutes, some of our bets in sports over the next 1 or 2 years. Football is huge. I don't know how many of you know, but the TRPs that the FIFA World Cup got in 2006 were higher than the TRPs that the Cricket World Cup in 2007 got in India. A lot of people don't realize how big the EPL clubs are in India. So, your Man U, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea are huge. Okay, we've got brands coming and talking to us saying that, okay, we know that we have an audience here in India. How do we tap these clubs? So right now we're on the verge of finalizing a deal with Barcelona, FC Barcelona, for one of the major, I would say, beer manufacturing companies in India to be the India sponsors, Indian official refresher of Southeast Asia. Similarly, we've got companies like the Tata Group who are very keen on expansion in Europe and all over South America, looking very keenly at football. Football in India right now is totally participation, it's not participation focused, so I don't think too many of us here will play, but it's consumption focused. We all watch it. And football is, while India is never going to be even in the top 100, I would say, in the FIFA rankings, football will be the second biggest sport in India over the next 2 years. Okay. Besides that, why golf is always going to be big is because corporate India believes in golf. Corporates all over the world believe in golf. Okay, if you are a CEO and you're looking at attracting fellow CEOs, okay, you want to spend a day with them, you want to talk business with them. Boardrooms are state. No one does boardroom meetings anymore. The best way to get business is to go out on the golf course, do a corporate golf event, or get someone like a Tiger Woods do a skins event. Golf again is a very flexible sport. A lot of people don't consider it a sport, but it's it's very flexible. It has a lot of formats, right? Which is why golf will always be extremely niche, but at the highest end of the market, it's always going to be the #1 sport. Okay, the other trends that Globosport as a company will be focusing on this year is F1. All of you, I'm sure, know about Force India, the new team that Maria's launched. That's going to give a huge fillip to motorsports in India. There's tennis again. Apollo Tyres is a tire manufacturing company. They've just invested 100 crores in tennis over the next 10 years because they see value in tennis. and is something that we are driving with Apollo tires. We also have other companies extremely interested in tennis, because here again it's going beyond the metros, it's reaching out to SEC B towns, your B plus, SEC C towns. So tennis is always going to be big. Your Beijing Olympics, again, the Olympics are always pretty big in India. We won 2 individual gold medals in the past 100 years, but every time the Olympics come close by, there's a lot of jingoism in the air. And this is something we hope to ride on this year. We also feel that we have potential medal prospects in Beijing this year with the tennis guys, Mahesh, Leander and Sania, and also the shooters are tipped to do well. So I think that the Olympics are something that we can catch up. And finally, the Commonwealth Games that are coming up in Delhi in 2010. Again, 1982 is, I think, well before your time, but it changed the complexion of Delhi as a city. Delhi hosted the Asian Games in 82, changed the complexion of the city totally, the flyovers, the infrastructure. Something similar is happening to Delhi again in 2010 with the Commonwealth Games, and it will just be the stepping stone for the Olympic Games, which we will get in 2020. Right? So then again, a global sports properties is something that we are looking at. Okay, overall, in a nutshell, sports industry is growing. It's growing at an exponential rate, while other industries in India are growing at what I would say around anywhere from 20 to 40%. We are growing at a rate of 130, 140%, and this is just increasing. Last year we grew at around 80%. This year 140. Next year people are expecting it to go through the roof. Indicative of this is when I was applying to sports marketing companies in 2002. I could think of 3 names. Today I can give you, close to 30, 35 names. There are companies specializing in golf, companies specializing in football, companies like us doing pretty much the whole thing. So, that's how fast the industry is growing. In India, cricket is always going to be the mother sport. It's always going to be the religion, but other sports are growing too. So our bets will be football, tennis, and golf to an extent. Okay, brands are changing the perception. It's no longer about eyeballs, it's about giving the consumer, innovative touch points, which is what, properties like, the Standard Chartered Marathon or the tennis events are giving people. And finally, the idea is really to build unique properties, create athletes, create, events, and keep your eyes on the road and always be aware of what the competition is doing behind you. The ideal case scenario really would be to get to where America is. It's a totally evolved market. If someone like, India's best sports marketing professional today goes to America, he would be, he wouldn't stand a chance because the market is so evolved. And typically that's our aim to be where America is in the next 10 years. That's about it. So if there's a question, that was it. It depends on how big the celebrity is, but Globosport as a company functions slightly different from other celebrity management agencies in India. When we take on a client, we want complete control, because we think that unless we restrict his, unless we define his image, he can't expect us to get the money. So with Yuvraj, very clear that we tell him what endorsements to do and what not to do. A classic example was he was with this other company called Percept. Okay, and Percept was pushing him to do this deal for Lux. Lux is anywhere, right? We said no, although Lux was offering a lot of money, because we think that if UV says yes to Lux, you won't have a lot of companies interested in him because his brand value goes down. So while he was interested, we've told him no and he's listened to us. So typically it should be a mutual understanding, but we tell him what to do.
Does that what other than endorsements, directly going, what is it doing?
Depends on the relationship that we have with the client. For some celebrities like Yuri, it's the whole gamut. While you can't control his personal life, you can't control him dating, let's say, at the pickup or the corner. But we advise him and we manage his PR. But there are also other celebrities that we manage and we do only endorsements for them. Someone like Radhavan Singh Rathod, the shooter, I don't know if the bronze medalist, right? With him, we only do his endorsements because we think that he's got a decent image, he knows how to carry himself, and he's a player. So it depends from athlete to athlete.
So Globosport now with mostly engaged with sports like cricket, football, F1. What about the sports like hockey and sports like, promoting athletes, swimmers, are they planning to get into
Okay, Globosport has this trust called the Mittal Champions Trust, okay, which is something started by Mr. Lakshmi Mittal. He's put in a lot of money into it, and we run the trust for him. What we do is we identify talent across various sports, but there's only for Olympic-driven sports, because the idea of the trust is to create an Olympic champion by 2016. Okay, so within the trust, not with Globosport, but within the trust, we've got archers, we've got swimmers, we've got boxers, we've got pretty much anyone or everyone who's a medal prospect in 2016. So Globosport as a company, because we are profit driven, we don't really, we can't take on people like this because we need to make our money, right? Which is why we'll always have a Yuvraj, because brands will, pay money to a Yuvraj or to a Sanya, they won't pay money to a Pickup Padikal, which is why we started a trust, which is a self-funding trust. We've got people like Mr. Nilkani of ex-Infosys giving a lot of money to it, and the idea is really to give them world-class facilities. So yes, we do deal with other sports, but there's through other channel called the MCD.
Yeah. What are the management issues that you face with a firm like Globosport?
Management issues really people.
People.
Yeah.
Now, what is the nature of people? What reasons?
Okay, I won't be able to comment on the industry. I can comment on Globosport. Okay, because Paseka and Angie may have other issues. For us, it's finding the right people with the right kind of background in an industry like this, because it's so nascent. It's just started. We are trying to find people with the right experience, which is not easy.
What's the kind of people?
We're looking at, I think the core for Globosport is very simple. We're looking at passionate people. We are looking at people who understand the sport, right? But at the same time, we're also looking at people who understand the brands in the market. And then we are looking at people who understand brands and people who understand sports. Not too many people do that. So most of the stuff that, personally, I think 5 of us started Globosport, and all of us have learned on the job. And now we've come to a stage where we are hiring people, but we don't have the time to get them to learn on the job. So we're looking for people with some sort of experience. And I think the other issue that we face is something that I discussed about, is brands are not willing to go beyond cricket. Right? So that's a huge problem that any company, any sports marketing company will face forward.
So are these self-selection? People who are interested in sports strongly and who have brand interest, know what brand management, they are the ones who gravitate towards.
Yeah, also I think our PR hasn't been too good, mainly because a lot of people don't know where to go once if they're interested in sports marketing. I'm sure that's changing. It'll take a couple of years, but that's another issue that we face. We know the talent is out there, and we know that they're willing to join companies like us, but there's no way of them finding out what we do. So,
We spoke a lot about branding, the celebrities you all have, and carrying on PR activities. What about Globosport as an organization? When people think about Globosport, people associate it with Mahesh Bhupathi.
Yeah.
What do you all do to brand it apart from using Mahesh Bhupathi?
We do that. We have an in-house PR division which brands Globosport. So if you look at all our events, we make sure that our branding is there, so people know it's a Globosport event. In all the press releases that we send, be it quotes from celebrities, or let's say Sana gets involved in a controversy, you'll have a quote from someone from Globosport talking about it. So, but at the same time, as we are in the service industry, and any company in the service industry cannot be too pushy about its own, cannot be too pushy to put it that way.
Your branding is not so much for Aam Janata, it has to be for
brands,
either celebrities themselves, or it is for companies which are.
Yeah. So typically, if you look at India, if you look at brands in India, corporate India, I think a majority of them know what Globosport does. Similarly, you talk to any athlete or any celebrity across India, they know about Globosport. The Aam Janata is again to induct talent into a place like Globosport, but if you're looking at corporates and you're looking at celebrities, we've got a branding right there.
So you're talking about the Sanya is a running exercise, and the exercise putting on the map of the powerful India business.
Speak up in 1.2.
When you talk about Sanya is a branding exercise,
yeah.
you talk about Sanya is a branding exercise and the exercise of putting on the map as a incident a few months ago in which Ankita Bhavre accused the Indian media of not looking beyond Sanya Mirza when it comes to tennis in India. Doesn't such a campaign has its own effects on the development of the sport?
It does, but you can't blame either side really. You can't blame Ankita for feeling the way she does because it's a fact. I mean, Sanya gets all the coverage. We've been crying about the other aspect that cricket gets a lot of coverage. Yeah, so you can't blame someone like an Ankita for, being sour about that. But at the same time, you look at it from the media's perspective. They are merely writing what sells. Ultimately, the common man doesn't want to read about the Sanya, doesn't want to read about an Ankita Bhavre, they want to read about the Sanya Mirza. Similarly, most people don't want to read about tennis, they want to read about cricket. And ultimately, you can't blame the media for doing their job. We are trying to strike a balance, and I think the media is getting educated about, they need to be more responsible. So you'll have a lot more articles on, if you look at typically the Times of India, you have the main sports page which is all about cricket, and then you have 3 pages which is actually devoted to other sports. So the media is growing up, but yeah, there will always be people who will complain, and everyone has a job to do at the end of the day. So. No, there's definitely a market, which is why the PHL is doing so well. But as a company, we need to, go to places where we know that we'll be the market leader. PHL is run by this company called Globosport Marketing along with ESPN, and that it's already taken. They're already there. We don't see much potential around hockey. What else can we do? So our idea is to focus around innovative properties, new properties. So while I would say that we should have followed PHL maybe 3 years ago and done it, now we're looking at other avenues. So hockey really is not the sport we've thought of because there's enough happening already. Yeah.
So how do you decide how much advertising needs to be done? Because as per what you said, the expenditure on advertising is almost double the sponsorship. But if you see all the major cricketing events, there are lots of advertisers coming in. And what happens is you never get to see the first ball of the new over or the last ball of the previous over. So is that much advertising really required? The major firms doing this advertising are FCI, which are anyways doing. So do they require to do so much of advertising?
No, I totally agree with you. Right? But that's again not a call that we take as a sports marketing company. That's a brand's call and that's a channel's call. So if you see the difference between coverage, your setbacks when it was covering a lot of the cricket or even 10 sports and Z sports will become one entity. You'll end up missing a lot of stuff. But if you're watching the cricket coverage in Australia, on ESPN because it's a hardcore sports channel, I don't think this is happening. So, ultimately it's a brand's call how much they want to spend. That's not a call we take it. But we are very clear that if a company needs to manage out of cricket, it needs to spend a huge amount of money to be noticed. And if you look at the kinds of marketing spends, there are not more than 5 companies in India that have that kinds of marketing. So I think when we try to watch each and every ball, that's in the hands of an ESPN or the Max. Yeah.
Let's assume a situation. This is the start of the year, and you've endorsed sort of company. Okay. You are the owner of sort of company or the ads and all that. And some unforeseen event happens due to which Ganguly is thrown out of the team.
Which happened last year.
Okay. So none of the companies now are going to invest in sort of company. You have a contract of 1 year or 2 years or whatever.
Yes.
What do you do?
Each contract is a performance clause. Okay, ultimately, really one aspect of it. How many of you have seen Jerry Maguire the movie? Yeah, right. Okay, that's the ideal sports agent. Okay, where it's not all about the money, it's also about relationships. So his athlete may not be doing that well. Okay, but if you have a relationship with him, he will stick out to you and you won't have expectations. But that's ideal again. Typically, what happened with Saurabh Ganguly was he is with this company called the Set, and there's not much of a Set or even a Globosport can do if he's dropped. So while he will continue to be with his manager on paper, he won't get any endorsements, and you won't go out and aggressively market him. On what basis will you market him to any brand? So it is a tricky situation, but we've had to drop athletes in the past because there's no money there, and as long as their expectations of him, it's all about expectation setting. If Saurabh Ganguly, when he wasn't doing well, if he expected a lot out of the Set would have dumped him, right? But he was clear that he wasn't doing well and he didn't expect any endorsements. and so Percept wasn't really wasting any time on him, which is why he's still with the Percept today. So typically, we'd like to keep a relationship and keep the person on, but it all depends on performance really.
So you won't end the
We'd like not to end the contract. We never like to end contracts with our clients. But, we've ended contracts in the past. I'm sure we'll end contracts in the future too. It's all about the money.
Can you tell something about the Chak De and the after effects with respect to the hockey? No. Yeah.
I think it was a popular movie.
Yeah.
But as far as having a lockdown on the masses, more people picking up hockey, I don't think made a difference at all. They have a few more women watching hockey. I'm not too sure how many people start playing hockey, so I think it did well for Shah Rukh Khan and did well for the production house. And hockey got noticed. A few more people may go and actually watch the PHL in Chandigarh. But it takes a lot more than a Chak De to restore a game like hockey.
Just to go ahead with this question, if you look at the US market and you look at the number of Bollywood or the films would be the biggest competition to sports today. But do you think they can also be used to revive a game or to bring a game to a popularity level? Because the number of films made in Hollywood on sports is huge, and they're selling also. Take any sport as such, there'll be at least 5 films on it. Here you have 3 films on cricket probably. That's about it. And one film Chak De.
I think that's happening because ultimately again it's a function of money, right? I mean, if a producer or director is making money or investing money in a movie, he needs to make sure that money comes back. Now people have tried with cricket. There were movies made on cricket. I can remember at least 3-4 movies. I don't remember the names, but because I'm a sports lover, I remember watching these movies. None of them did well. Okay, the only movie before Chak De, the only sports movie that was a success was, I think, the cycling movie. Was a success. There was this football movie with Anil Kapoor where he was a goalkeeper. That again was a success. But ultimately, it's a question of a producer putting money where he thinks he'll get returns. There is a range of movies coming up in the sports field which are doing well. Chak De did well. Gold did pretty well. It was totally focused on football. This is again something that not too many people know. We started a movie production business. This is a hardcore mainstream Bollywood business. But the idea really germinated from this fact that there's a market out there, and ultimately to build an ecosystem, you need to have all facets, and movies and sports, have certain synergies. So we started a movie production business, and maybe in the next 4-5 years we'll have a movie made on Indian tennis. But we do get a lot of scripts, like Sania, for example, last year got 3 scripts, on about her life. A couple of them were asking her to play a lead in a movie. The other one was about her life. Some like Rathod has had scripts given to him, about how he made it as a shooter. So sports movies are being made at a larger frequency than what they were before. And while sports movies in the US have done well, but here I think again it's not a ball market. But I see no reason why sports movies should do well in a couple of years. Chak De is just a start, really.
But they have helped revive any sport.
No, but it makes, again, it's not about...
It's part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's part of the ecosystem. I mean, you'll have people watching hockey, they'll understand the sport, then when they have...
Provided you do those other things, the sport
Yeah. The entire ecosystem.
Can you shed some light on the organization, the kind of people you look for, and as MBA graduates, what kind of career options are open to us? How do we enter the field, how do we go, and what are the plans?
To add on to that, how does a person who hasn't had experience in this industry, has worked in other sectors, or is a fresher, passionate about sports, get into the organization like Globosport, where you grow only for people who have had that experience?
No, that's the ideal case scenario. I was just sharing it with a couple of batchmates. Last month in Bangalore, we recruited someone who's got 0 work ethics. Okay. I think as a company, Globosport looks at someone who's again very passionate, hardworking, and who has a good knowledge of sports. Just to answer your question again, Globosport has 7 divisions. Okay, there's infrastructure, part of the ecosystem again, there's infrastructure, there's PR, there's sales and marketing, there's celebrity managers. Typically, if we go to, we keep getting resumes from the IIMs and ISBs, people who want to join us. Right? Typically, what we would look at is a sales and marketing role because we can't see, someone with an MBA degree fitting into any of the other profiles. For example, the events division is something that we recruit very aggressively. But then again, if you don't know, how to run an event, you don't know how much, branding costs, you don't know how much, constructing, an audio-visual counts, we can't hire you. At the same time, in terms of sales and marketing, we're constantly in the lookout, as I just mentioned, of people who, while they understand the sports, like you guys, understand the Indian market, understand the Indian entertainment, sports, and corporate industries. So typically, those are the types of people we're looking at. Ideally, we'd like to get people with a lot of workings, but Globosport again is a 5-year-old company. We're still growing. Our monies are not huge. So while we would love to hire people with 10 years in the industry.
You don't need people who need large numbers of people.
Yeah.
Be few but very
Exactly. Right now in Globosport we have a total of 45 people. And we are just #1 sports and entertainment marketing industry. Just to give you a perspective, we manage a total of 31 celebrities across sports and Bollywood. Our closest competitor manages 5. And we do it with 45 people. While we are stretched and we work really hard, but yeah, it's not the quantum of people. We're looking at people who have the right skill sets really. And we are not hung up about experience at all. While we would like that, experience comes with a cost, and cost is an issue with us. So, yeah.
It's a private limited company.
It is a private limited.
So any plans of going public?
He was the first guy.
Exactly.
He's impressed. In 6-7 years, valuation needs to happen first. Valuation will process that because it's not a very structured industry. So valuation again is we are currently valuating ourselves not because of an idea or anything, but because we need to know our worth in the market. So the valuation process itself, because the industry is very subjective, how do you know how much value there is in managing a celebrity business or doing a sports event? So yeah, that's the ultimate objective. Hopefully in 10 years we will retire, sell our stakes in Globosport and retire in the Philippines.
You mentioned one of your components of revenue is licensing.
Yeah.
What would that include?
Licensing would be rights to sports properties and merchandising. Classic example is the Commonwealth Games. We are working with the Commonwealth Federation, or we are bidding with bidding with an Australian company, bidding to the Federation to get the Indian rights to merchandise the games. Okay, merchandising, we think, merchandising typically means, your T-shirts with the official logo, your dolls, balloons, the works. So licensing and merchandising typically means that. Yeah, and 19% of all global sponsorships is merchandising. Merchandising is non-existent in India. It started with Nike. Since they are a sports apparel company, they do only apparel merchandising, but it needs to go beyond that.
So you get exclusive rights to do
yeah. So if anyone, let's say the Commonwealth Games happens in 2010 and someone is looking at coming out with the official mascot doll, they will have to come to us if we get the merchandising rights.
I have one more question. Would you differentiate between individual sports and team sports when you choose to kind of, like you say, you choose maybe golf, or you choose tennis, or you choose, do you actually consider whether it's an individual or team sport, or you just take the sport on its own?
Yeah, there are two aspects to this, but I think most pertinent one would be looking at from a brand's perspective. We work as consultants with a lot of brands. So very often, you have a brand coming up to us and saying that, okay, this is our target audience. This is the profile of our brand. Let's say very youthful. We want to target the youth. What do we do? And we know that sports is something that the youth are interested in. So what do we do? Based on their feedback and their summary to us, we get back to them with options. A classic example again is the Polo Tires came up to us saying that okay, we've identified our target audience. We've identified sports. Okay, but within sports, we've identified motor racing, we've identified adventure sports, we've identified tennis, and we've identified football. Where do we go? We did a study. I mean, we don't get into dipstick studies and all that. We think that's a waste of time. But we felt that tennis had the potential. Okay, based on what they had told us and also seeing the growth in India, and went back to them saying that why don't you invest in tennis? And this is what all you can do in tennis, and it has the ecosystem. So typically, it's not a question of individual sports or team sports. It depends on the brand's needs.
So what activities is Globosport looking at in the near future to capitalize on the increasing awareness of the media and Champions League?
The person who actually, the CEO of my company, has been to London twice in the last 2 months. Okay, this again is working both ways. We have a lot of Indian companies who are looking at going to Europe and specifically the UK. Okay, so they're looking at tying up with, they're looking at actually global deals with the EPL clubs there. So you've got a company in India, one of the biggest industrial houses in India, who's looking at coming on as the title sponsors of one of the Premiership clubs. Okay. The other aspect is you've got all 4 clubs in the Premiership, which is Chelsea, Arsenal, Man U, and Liverpool, and the 2 top Spanish clubs, Barcelona and Madrid, who are very keen on the Indian market. All 6 clubs have sent representatives to the Indian market over the past 6 months, and are constantly in talks with agents like us and with companies directly to see how they can tap the Indian market. Again, I was just sharing it with a couple of your batchmates. We were looking at this big global football event in Goa in March. It fell through at the last moment because you've had a problem with the government. It's not stable right now. We're looking at it in August again. But there is a lot of, I would say, a lot of potential for football in India. And you've got global clubs looking at India and China very aggressively. Last year you had Real Madrid going to China for the pre-season loan. This year it's a bit too late because they've already tied up their schedules in Southeast Asia. But next year we are very actively looking at someone like a Barcelona coming to India to do the tour. Manchester United has tied up with the Goa Football Federation and the AIFF, for academies in India. Yeah. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. So as far as football is concerned, the potential is huge and work is already started.
You spoke about digital rights and you said that's an Netflix thing. How does that revenue model really work? In terms of using a live feed or using commentary, how do you make money off it? How do you pay people? How does that whole model work?
Okay, I'll give you a classic example is a signing measure. Okay. Right now you download wallpapers, screen images. Who gets the money? The operator gets the money. What we are doing is we are taking our entire bouquet of 30, 31 celebrities to operators, saying that we've got the content, so let's say you've got a signing measure. Okay, we have rights to the images, so we sell you the images. You take a bit of that money, you give a bit of that money to us, which we share between Sanya and Rizal. Besides that, the sky's the limit really as far as the digital world is concerned. So she's playing a match in Hobart, yesterday. You want a 2-minute highlights package, instead of going to a channel. We speak to the WTA, which is the governing body, buy the rights of that, and then sell it to operators, mobile operators in India. Right? Similarly, in terms of the internet, she can have a daily weblog, where she, something like Facebook, right? Start a Sanya web page or start a UV web page where I know, you demand a certain subscription fee. Let's say on your cell phone, $50 for a month, and you have access to, UV talking to you maybe once in every 3 days. You get video clips if your phone is GPRS enabled. You get video clips every week. I'm sure all of us wouldn't mind paying 50 rupees for that. And if you translate that into numbers, you know how many people, we have millions subscribed onto your mobile phones in India. You even know 1% of that when you spend $50 a month. You multiply that, and the monies that you're looking at are huge. Similarly, what Crick Info is doing with the live commentary. Here again, it doesn't cost anyone a penny. It's just free of cost. So once you actually monetize this and you have the rights, there's a lot of money to be made. This is the format that the US is using, where all sports marketing companies are getting 95% of their revenue through digital media and not through conventional sponsorships.
Isn't there a conflict of interest if Sony has paid a certain amount of money for
with terrestrial broadcast rights, right now the broadcast rights that Sony has are only electronic. Yeah. Okay, they don't have the new media rights, which is something that we get into in all our contracts. For example, the two tennis events that we own, one is run on 10 Sports, one is run on ESS, right? But they only have the TV rights to it. They don't have all rights. Typically, even 2 years ago, if you were to sign a contract with the channel would be very smart and tell you that we have all rights. So whether it's mobile rights, whether it's electronic rights, internet rights, they have all rights. That doesn't exist anymore. So that's how we plan right now.
Do you have any formal training programs for people for this industry anywhere in the world?
The US does. That's where you have sports courses. But then again, that is, I don't think it would benefit anyone from India to go there. Because while you learn the basics of sports market, they tend to concentrate a lot on individual sports and sports that we really don't understand. American football.
Given the kind of numbers, I wonder whether for any training organization it makes sense. It's not probably not sense to them.
I think all of us are just learning on the job and learning by talking to people in various industries.
People are
probably not doing that. And
Globosport is what exactly?
yes, and we're very confident. We've got IMG globally quite huge. In India, they almost shut down. We've got people like the set. So, in terms of manpower, I think the entire industry, if you look at the number of people we hire, I would say 500 tops. So I don't think you can start an institute with 500 students. Any more questions? Yeah.
One thing is
Just one thing. Just let me know how much time.
Any more questions?
There's one question.
Yeah, after the group,
there's a Z group that has started its own cricket league. Now, will propping up of so many clubs help the sport as a whole? Because what I'm saying is that we've got a lot of celebrities. Will it clutter the market or will it actually help?
I'm glad you brought the cricket league thing because I should have mentioned that in our presentation. The biggest thing that happened to India this year would be the IPL, which is the BCCI sanctioned league. Okay, and to answer your question, it's a good thing that there's so much money flowing in because the BCCI has had its money in its coffers. Now, thanks to what they're doing, the money will be spread out in more clubs. Subhash Chandra did that with the ICA. All said and done, the ICA didn't do too well. But in fact, there's a lot of talent out there got the opportunity to showcase their skills. Right, you have people like Amit Nisar, none of us have heard, even I haven't heard, who actually played the ICA, did pretty well. Yeah. So as far as the money is actually flowing into the sport, it's always a good thing. So I don't think it's detrimental. What was happening between the ICA and the BCCI, that wasn't good for the game. But the IPL, which is the officially sanctioned version, is going to come and sweep everything under the carpet. And the ICL will happen next year again. After that, it's dead, and then you have again one gorilla taking over everything, which is good for the sport. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Catchphrase for me. As a token of appreciation, I would like to ask Mr. Ashish Bhattapurkar